What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a few upcoming indie RPGs that you might have missed, because while this year has been absolutely packed with games, especially the last few months, there are quite a few games that have slipped under my own radar, to be sure, but also I imagine other people's, in lieu of all the amazing RPGs that have been coming out. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about a few of the games that I have been keeping an eye on, even if I might not be able to review them right away. Though to kick this off, I would like to start off with a bit of an honorable mention, as this game is not technically upcoming as it has already released just a few days ago, with The Iron Oath. This is an RPG centered around commanding a mercenary company around a medieval fantasy world known as Calum, which is dealing with all sorts of problems, not least of which the giant fire-breathing dragon destroying the place every so often. And this game shares a lot in common with games like Battle Brothers or War Tales, with a few unique spins at the same time, but ultimately it is a turn-based tactical game with mercenary company management in between. So if you like either of those other games I mentioned, this one might be worth checking out for you. Though with that out of the way, let's move on to the upcoming stuff, in roughly their order of release, which first brings us to Last Train Home. This is an upcoming TRPG, which brings with it a mixture of base management, though in this case your base is a train, alongside real-time combat, emphasizing tactics and strategy, of course. The story of the game is actually inspired by real events following World War I, and in this game we have to alternate between managing our train, its various cars, the shifts our soldiers are on, as you have to have people to, say, repair the train if it breaks down. You also have to send people scouting into the wilderness to gather supplies you might need, all while making story decisions along the way. And what I managed to play of this game via a demo recently was pretty engaging. This particular game is releasing on November 28th, so not too much longer to wait for this one in particular. So if you like TRPGs, you should probably keep an eye out for this one. Next up from there, we have Blood West, a sort of supernatural Western survival horror game in which we play a revenant brought back by spirits of the land to fight off evil and corruption that has gripped certain areas of the world. I've talked about Blood West a few times on the channel already, as it has been in early access for some time, but is slated to officially release on December 5th. And while I do really enjoy Blood West, I think that release date is very unfortunate, as it is the same day as Thaumaturge and 2 days before Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. But after I cover those games, I do plan on swinging back to take a look at this and probably Sea of Stars also in December as well. Blood West in particular, though, outside of what I've already mentioned and you see on screen here, has a lot of, I would say, almost immersive sim qualities. You're more or less thrown into an area of the game, given the situation about what you need to do to hunt down the evil in the area, but how you manage that and how you approach it is largely up to you. There's a variety of gameplay systems and enemies, of course, all with a supernatural approach, things like that, which all combines to make a surprisingly atmospheric game for its retro graphics. So while I won't be covering this one right away on release, it is a game I am excited for, and I am looking forward to playing the launch version of it. That brings us to our third entry, however, with SKALD Against the Black Priory. Now, right out of the gate on this one, I do need to mention that technically this one doesn't have a release date yet, but it is still slated for 2023. However, with it obviously getting very close to the end of 2023 and it still not having an official release date, I do think it's possible this one might get pushed back a little bit. But the game itself, also utilizing a very retro art style, aims to be a party-based RPG set in a grimdark fantasy world, in which we are accosted by Lovecraftian horrors alongside other enemies which we have to take on in classic turn-based combat. But what's more, however, is this is a game where choices matter. There are multiple ways through it, and the game has a branching narrative. So while I don't think this type of game is going to be for everyone simply because of the art style, things like that, I have played SKALD previously via a demo that is still publicly available, and I think it has a lot of potential for what it is. For me, however, I would say that the most compelling part is the Lovecraftian stuff, as it seems very occult and mysterious with how it's implemented, and I'm excited to see what they do with that across the entirety of this game. That does, however, bring us to number 4 on the list, with Enshrouded, which is set to release on January 24th of 2024. Enshrouded is an action RPG with a lot of crafting and base building elements, and I was able to take a look at this game via the previous Steam Next Fest, in which this game had a demo available for people to check out. And while this game is launching into early access on January 24th, what I played of it showed a lot of promise. This game actually surprised me a little bit. And while there's obvious rough edges in terms of animations and graphics and things like that, the core gameplay systems were a ton of fun. Outside of course, just building up your base as you do in many of these types of games, there's also a bit of a storyline as we play a character awakened into a sort of dying world being suffocated by a corrupting fog. We need to set out into the world and sort of push that back and try to save the place, and we do this by rescuing other NPCs who then assist us with crafting and things like that as we build up our own abilities and combat skills to take on various bosses out in the world, which makes for a pretty compelling set of gameplay mechanics that I enjoyed a lot more than I thought I would. And while I don't review early access games as a general rule, I will almost certainly check this game out when it launches in January, because as I said, what I played of it was pretty compelling. That, however, brings us to our final entry on this list, and this is the remake of Geneforge 2, known as Geneforge 2 Infestation. The Geneforge series is a series of CRPGs from Spiderweb Software, a popular indie CRPG developer, notable for their Geneforge series of course, but also Avernum, and Spiderweb Software is essentially like two people, and over several decades they have made a lot of CRPGs. The Geneforge series I believe has 5 entries, the Avernum series I believe has 6, and that's not even all the games they've made. But due to the popularity of Geneforge and Avernum in the CRPG space, which I cover pretty frequently, I had been going through the Geneforge series initially. I've played and reviewed the first one, I still need to play all of the Avernum ones, but the remake of Geneforge 2 is coming out in Q1 2024 with a release date yet to be determined. So naturally, that's almost certainly where I'll be picking up this particular series again to make sure that I check out the second entry in this series. But Geneforge, I think from a lore perspective, is a really cool concept because we play a shaper, a wizard of sorts who has mastered the art of creating life. They can shape things into monsters and summons to fight for them, and this comes in a variety of forms and methods. And the games often like to explore the, I would say, moral conundrums that come with that kind of power, which makes for a really interesting story and narrative, even if the games themselves are certainly a little bit clunky. So naturally, Geneforge 2 has my interest as it is one of those series of games I've been really wanting to wrap up and finish completely for quite some time, which thanks to all the game releases this year had to be pushed back a bit. That said, that's pretty much going to do it for this video. That has been 5 upcoming indie RPGs you might have missed, though I'm sure there are many more out there than just that. So by all means, let me know what you think of these down in the comments section below, but also feel free to mention any upcoming RPGs that you think went under the radar that people might have missed, as I always love learning about games, and there are frankly a little too many to keep complete track of these days. But regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.